There's two ingredients to good marketing advice. First, no BS, cut through the noise, get right to the point. And number two is somebody who has done it before, a practitioner. Today's guest and the first guest of season 3, Matt Froehlich, checks both of those boxes. A local Green Bay marketer who is currently the media buyer and strategist at Eve Star and has held other roles such as content marketing specialist and account manager in his past. He brings a lot of wisdom, a lot of nuance, and as I opened with, he cuts right through the noise. No BS. I love it. I hope you get as much as I did from this conversation. Welcome to season 3 of On Marketing, a show where we explore what marketing is. Like really is. I won't tell you what to think. I'll help you improve how you think about marketing. It's February 23rd, 2024. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. Ready to get in? Before we do, make sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter to get new episodes right when they drop, extra insights, and my favorite, the occasional cat photo. It's fittingly called a newsletter on marketing. The link to join is in the first line of the show notes. And finally, all opinions shared in this podcast are individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associate organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional marketing guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. I hate that I have to do that. Thank you for being here, and let's get into the episode. What job should marketing get done in a company?
Oof. Unfortunately, it has to carry the water for a lot of jobs, I say. Like, there's a lot of times where in traditional marketing, people will say sales and marketing align. I think that's definitely true, but as you get further and further down in the weeds, like, well, it could be humanitarian or philanthropy. It could be general knowledge, brand awareness, top of funnel, bottom funnel. Like, a lot of things it has to carry the water for. I think they should all have their own place and opportunity, but at the end of the day, I would say overall just recognition, understanding who you are, so it makes my job as a marketer or your job, Jordan, as a salesperson, if you're in a role, to get that barrier of entry a little bit easier. It's not a true cold call because someone's already seeing your content, seeing your ads, follow you organically or know about you through the community. So it carries everything, honestly. It's just a matter of which direction and how much weight you put towards it.
For me, that makes it critical to kind of in every company define what those jobs are, because to your point, every company, depending on what they're trying to get done or their business goals, it could kind of have a slightly different job that it's doing. But to your point of getting that awareness, getting somebody first through those first, like, what do they do? What do they do different? So then I like to call it kind of lubes up the sales conversation. It's a terrible word, but it's like, it just makes it like easier, to your point, to get someone closer, or they just know right away, this isn't for me.
Definitely 100%. And like, yeah, whatever verb or adjective, verb you want to use to describe it, that's fine. But it's totally grease the wheels, if you will. Like, it's very important to do that 100%.
Yeah, grease the wheels. That's a nicer one than lube, but I like to do those things that get the shock value. But
I agree.
I love it. So in the past few years, Matt, what have you changed in regards to marketing? So maybe it's not like a full pivot or 180, but it's just like now you kind of believe something slightly different. Does anything come to mind that you've pivoted on?
So like the last 4 years I've been in marketing, right? Traditional marketing, truly working for an agency, working with brands, working with partners. From a foundational level, when I was 19, 20 years old, I was marketing myself within college, within extracurriculars, on-campus television, radio, internships, whatever. And I think I was always have been cognizant of what my internet presence looks like, even going back to like MySpace days. Like, what does my MySpace page look like? Because it's like, if I have a function to edit or customize something, I'm generally going to do that because I like to stick out from the crowd. I like to have something be like, wait, why did he have that post linked like that? Or why did he put that copy in a certain format so it reads like it's all trial and error. So I think that foundationally has always been a part of my characteristic or part of my creative process. Always pursuing and adding a bio or adding a hyperlink here, because why the hell not? It just makes people more curious, because I know I'm curious. Jordan, you're curious within marketing. We're always clicking around, tapping, figuring it out. To answer your question, what's changed, I would say you get into a job and you think it has to be a certain way, or you get into an industry and you think hey, this is what it looks like. I hear top marketers talk about this, whether they're social media people promoting a course, or someone that's truly from a foundational level done marketing at Red Bull or Liquid Death or wherever. And there are those foundational things that are important. Good copywriting, proper structure of a sentence, proper structure of a post, proper cropping, not bad audio, good visualization. So I think those foundational things are there, but truly whatever rules you're adhering by, those can be adjusted. And I think there's oftentimes you need to pivot. And I know within my industry right now, as far as a media buyer or growth marketer, like I would say every 6 weeks, I'm having to check my own bias, whether that's a certain campaign I'm running on a meta ad, the way I'm doing a structure. Algorithm might change. Shockingly, Jordan, Mark Zuckerberg's not giving us a press release to say how to run our media better, right? It's trial and error, and you have a scope of brands you work with. So I would say just always being able to check your own bias, whether it's how you're writing, what certain ad style is working, whether it be truly an orientation level, whether it's a 1x1 or a 4x5 or a landscape. Because platforms change. Twitter used to not support squared images. They used to have to be like those horizontal images. So it's like always just remembering where you're posting, and I think just being able to adjust and not being so tied down to those secondary, third-party things that truly don't matter when you look back on them.
I like that. So you have those foundational aspects of marketing or whatever you're talking about, but then above that, you're always kind of questioning or rethinking per se how to better do those things. And that's maybe what those experts, those great people in the field, they can break the rules because they know them well enough. Is that kind of maybe where?
Yeah, I think, marketing from a traditional sense is trying to get people or a group of people excited or enthusiastic about something. You're selling whatever that may be, whether it's a product or you're selling peace of mind, you're selling luxury, you're selling clout. That's fine, and you're pulling at people with mediums of ad copy, headline, subheadline, or creative or long form video, and like those are all things you're trying to pull in someone's soul and their heartstrings. But how does everything else matter around that? Does it really matter that maybe I use some untraditional Merriam-Webster dictionary words? Like, did I use like a shortened abbreviation of something, and maybe that will pull towards my demo, maybe it doesn't, maybe it makes us seem less professional. But I think always adapting the way things are going, and where the consumer behavior is going, I think is important to understand.
Yeah, and I think that's probably more important today than it was maybe if you were a marketer in 1970 or 1980, 1990. Of course, culture as people are changing, but it seems today, both with your point of the algorithms changing rapidly, but it's just like there's things that are in and out very fast. And I don't know if that's because of the internet, because people can catch on to things and then they get bored, new things. It just seems like marketers today have to be more have more wisdom, right? Because I think really at the core of this is some level of being wise. It's like we just do these things this way always. It's like, well, that's not that wise, right? It's being able to think in who, to your point, demographic, like using this word or using these types of words, does that actually push them away? Thinking we're too too kind of high level versus speaking basically when you're trying to like talk to doctors, maybe then you need to use those bigger words. Exactly. So I really like that. I think wisdom is something that is needed. It was always needed, but even needed more of like, how do you apply a specific piece of knowledge to the domain, to the platform?
Definitely, I really like that. Definitely. And I work, just to wrap too, like I work with different clients across the world, across the country. Culturally, you have to understand how those people work. I have a client from the UK that just moves a little bit slower than how we work. And that's fine, but you have to understand what's going on and adhere to those and how their clients might be talked to. And like back to your point of things that I'm always one to like, hey, if there's a new feature on X or Instagram, I'm going to try it out for myself. I want to screw around with it. Like I want to see on this weekend late at night if I'm going to screw around for 2 hours and it makes sense, because maybe it becomes a big thing. But something as fleeting as Twitter fleets, we tried it out. It was stupid. It lost. And the market is the market of the market. So the market is going to tell you if it makes sense to something you should double down on, and if there is a tangible monetary or feel-good type of reason to be doing something. And if it's not, your consumers will tell you, right? Yeah, but back to 1970s, I always think of this TV show. I've never watched it, Mad Men. It seems like the exact type of show that a marketer should watch, or maybe not watch. But I definitely need to dive in and watch it at some point. But that's what I always think traditionally. Smoking cigarettes, storyboards, figuring out this big media push that they're pushing, I don't know, who knows what.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'll be the second to admit. There's been a few people who have talked about Mad Men on this show, and I have to just shake my head as if I've watched it. I have never watched it either. I know people swear by it, so I'll have to at some point. And I think your point, too, about marketers enjoying to, and I'll use the word that you didn't use, dick around with different types of things. I think it's like built into some marketers, and that's just a skill. They can kind of try things. I mean, Threads, there's just so many of them. Clubhouse, I think that's just something that as a marketer, as somebody, it's important to have that practitioner mindset first. I'm going to go do it and then bring it to clients or bring it to my organization, because you don't know until you try. And just saying that won't be big is kind of mailing it in, right? It's not actually doing the work to figure out like, could this be viable? And maybe it's viable for a period. Clubhouse probably worked for a little bit for some people, and then you have to pivot. I think that's the rethinking or the relearning, always being open to shift. On the topic of podcast, what's something that you see, whether it's an individual organization, that kind of when they start out with podcasting, it's that face palm-esque moment. It's like, you're making that mistake that you could easily avoid. Do any easily avoidable things come to mind for you?
Number one, without question, is consistency and building it out to make it easy. If this is your full-time revenue maker, which I commend anyone that can make that happen, that's great that your focus can be there, but generally this is a passion project or a subsidiary of a business. And more often than not, it's not really going to get you the best ROI short term. It's a long-tail game. So making sure you're not overly focused 40 to 50 hours a week on growing the podcast instead of doing your regular job. So I would say definitely consistency, reasonable expectations, maybe an episode every week, every 2 weeks, something you can adhere to, stick with a schedule, just like it's like exercising.
Yeah, I know there's these statistics that so many podcasts never break 7 episodes or whichever, which just goes to that point that it's a marathon, not a sprint, I think, with podcasts, and you need to have that expectation up front, and you need to plan accordingly. And I think, too, expectations are just like desired outcomes is key to write down, because I think naturally it's like, to your point, podcasting will get clients. Okay, that's one desired outcome, and it's usually a long-term outcome. But what about improving your ability to speak? What about connecting with key businesses or different people in your area, in your target market that you never would? But you say, hey, come on my podcast, and come on. There's nobody that I meet that doesn't want to talk about themselves or give their own. I mean, it's so easy to get someone to come on, and that relationship's now somewhat built. You have to do then more work or whichever. But I think it's so critical to define, like for myself, the first season of this was to learn SaaS marketing. Season 2 was, kind of this actually to get better at talking, but there's just so many ways of a podcast, so many outcomes that aren't direct sales that are really, content creation, macro content, doing a podcast 1 hour maybe, and you have a month's worth of content. How do you think about, clearly the current podcast that you're on is quite niche, quite focused on the Packers and all these different shows around that, but like, can a podcast succeed being very broad, being like, I'm going to do it on marketing, this, that, or how do you approach it? Start small, or what's your advice there?
I think it probably goes 2 ways. I think definitely one of them is just, how interesting are you? Like, truly, like, be a little bit self-aware. Like, are you just kind of a boring person? And that's okay. Maybe, but maybe that's just based around your interest level, or just your maybe introvertedness, or your lack of, I don't know, maybe you're a job, you just go 9 to 5 and you don't really have a ton of interaction, so you kind of become a little bit more shriveled in your interpersonal. That could be something. But I think oftentimes, like, some of the best podcasts are super entertaining people. Like, and I'll be scrolling the internet and on TikTok or Instagram, whatever, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, there's another Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura clip. I don't watch their podcast, but those guys are funnier than hell. Like, anyone can laugh to that. I honestly think, like, if you can't laugh at some of the stuff those guys do, you're kind of a little bit of a prude, stick in the mud. So I think it's definitely the guest. As far as like the niche, I don't know. I go back and forth on that because, like, the Packers are a super wide brand, obviously international. It's very, very saturated with content out there. which is great because everyone's passionate about their team and whatever. But I do think there is some merit to getting super, super granular. There's someone on Packers content whose name is Ken Engels. He is a CPA by trade. However, he gives us his vast knowledge and breaks down the salary cap. And to the point where it's so integral that he knows the nuances of the average amount of money that Packers will go into a season, knowing that a situation could happen last minute where they need to sign a player. So you might look on a national level and be like, oh, the salary cap is this. It's like, no. Go check out Ken, because Ken knows exactly to within, $250,000, $500,000 what it's actually at. So you could probably have a podcast entirely around the salary cap if you wanted. Now, it's going to isolate some people, right? Some people don't really care about the numbers. They want to know of the gossip, the rumor, trades, drafts, the hot takes. So it just kind of depends on what that niche is. I think Gary Vee, and I've mentioned him twice already, which is, I guess, disappointing or maybe great. But he's always talked about, just going towards your passion. I always think the example he always talks about is if you like coffee mugs or if you're super into like platypuses, like just do content. It's like, okay, well, there does become a return on investment where it just people don't care enough. But maybe there is an audience in this 7 billion people in this world that would care about if you're super passionate about something. I don't know. It kind of goes one way or the other, but be an expert on that. Like you can't do everything and be good at all of it. You can be, decent at some of it, but you can't think I can do a podcast on marketing, traveling, the Packers, music. And it's like, wait. 7 episodes we talked about this. Now we're talking about this. Where am I? What am I doing? I don't expect everyone to be as lack of attention span as I am with the certain things they focus on.
Yeah, those are good, Matt, because I think the first one's important. It's kind of being self-aware to a point. It's like, how entertaining am I? And to your point, if I'm not entertaining, I haven't ever done one of these, but doing a narrated kind of podcast where it's telling these stories, because if you're not super interesting, maybe you can use your voice in a way that then you're telling a story, walking through like a business that succeeded, or why did Blockbuster fail? And it's a narration show. And no, that does take far more time. You're adding like maybe interview clips from Blockbuster people into it. It's almost like those docu-series that you see on Spotify or iTunes. So I think it's really just knowing, like for the examples you used, like those people are comedians, they're funny. So it's like their show, and I've been getting into a lot of different comedian shows and seeing how they approach podcasting and stuff. And I think that's the first step, is to know who you are and where your strengths are. I think for me, this show is deep. It goes because I like those questions. Sure, there's funniness too, self-deprecation, little of this, little of that, but I think that's important to know who are you, and then do that well. And I think to your point about the niche, there's so many people who can take one or the other way. I think naturally, like it's kind of broken down to this: pick a large audience set with a very specific topic, or pick a very general topic with a specific audience. So that's like one way to think, and there's so many ways, but I think to your point, you have to be passionate about it. You have to have something you enjoy. And I think it's different too if it's a company. I think honestly, a lot of times for companies, it's not about your product. It's not about the thing you're selling. It's maybe about the progress your audience is trying to make, or things they care about, or maybe entertainment, because they enjoy, like, it's just funny marketing jokes or whatever. And it's like, that's not really helping talking about a product or anything, but it gets people to relax after Friday, relax after their job. So again, that comes to intention. Like, what is the purpose or point of this podcast? What do you think about, or what frameworks or mental models like help you create good content, whether it's personal, company? Like, what goes into that? What are some of the first things a person, a brand could do to start making better content?
I have many, many lists. I have right over here a whiteboard. I have another recycled notebook over here that I take my scrap piece of paper from my printer right down there. I have notes on this laptop. I have notes on this computer. I have notes on this device. Because our society is based around microwave moments, 6 seconds of attention span. I think you said that on a recent episode with someone. And I'm like, man, 6 seconds seems like a lot. But like when I am in line at the grocery store waiting for those 27 seconds to get through, and I see something and I take a picture of it or I write it down, more often than not I'm going to remember it, at least that way, because I did that physical action or I wrote it down. Very simple to just drive down the road or be walking through the mall and be like, when I get home I'm going to remember that. You're just not. That's just truly what it is. So I think I find comfort knowing that, you know what, I might have 100 ideas in the day. I might write down or think of 50 of them and jot them down, and maybe one of them is phenomenal. But if I'm never taking action on those potentially great ideas, whether I am stone cold sober when I wake up at night, or at 5 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, where I'm having an adult beverage, I have a great idea, and it becomes a reality because it's written down on a cocktail napkin or written down on a notepad, and it's like I'm able to execute on those things. Truly, it could be just a tweet that I have in my head of something, and I'm like, hey, I remember that cool podcast I heard a year ago. It's kind of come to fruition, whether it be about the Packers or something in AI or whatever. I should tweet that out, and I just want to have a diary, if you will. That's kind of what my Twitter ends up being. It's just like I try to be as, without having Neuralink in my brain, as close to it as I can, just being almost like instantaneously like writing something down, scheduling it, drafting it out. So I think just writing things down, getting ideas on paper, and then, hey, this doesn't have to be polished. The internet's cool because you can actually go ahead and edit things or delete things. And, it does last forever, but you can adjust it. If I put out a tweet and I have a spelling error, well, that sucks. I can delete it and start over. But I think it's important to just take action towards some of those ideas and write them down.
To just kind of reinforce that idea, I just wrote down a company that I was thinking.
I love that.
I'm like, yeah, I love it. But it is so true. In one way, I think, swipe files are all different names for these things, but I heard it said once of kind of having a content idea garden per se, and you kind of throw these ideas, these seeds in that garden, and I think of it in stages where Twitter, even for me maybe, or X for you, LinkedIn for me, it's this place where I can kind of just throw some water on ideas, see, does anybody like it? Does anybody comment on it? Do we go further? Is there interest? And then from that, it's like, no, yes. If yes, go write an article, go write more of a micro essay on it. If that gets enough, let's do a podcast on it. If that podcast gets, it could be a large enough concept to say, what is marketing? Hell, let's make a full show out of that. Like, it keeps going, and now you have a tree, and from that tree, you're still throwing these seeds in every day, every minute, every hour. And I think that's so critical. And I think today with our digital tools, you don't need a cocktail napkin even. You can pull your phone out, dictate even if you want to even get crazier into it of, hey Siri, add this to my notes, or just dictate. That's a really good point, because I think the best output comes from ideas, not all good ideas, but just ideas you're constantly collecting, and you can intertwine those together if you get enough of like, that's two that should be together or whichever.
Like you said, it's just like your garden. You're always manifesting new ideas. You become better at it. You become better at training your brain to say, oh my gosh, I'm driving in a roundabout right now, but I need to remember to write this down in 30 seconds when I park at Walmart. And you become a little bit more cognizant of like how your brain functions. You have a little more control over it, if you will. Instead of never writing them down, you're like, oh, just another silly idea I had. It's just gone. So yeah, it's fun, it's unique, but we're influenced by a lot. And just right now I have 3 tabs up next to my computer, which isn't a lot. It's just an email and something else. I have my phone upside down. It's so easily distracted, and it's cool because we have all these ways to digest and ingest media, but it's distracting as hell, whether it be communication, personal, professional, whatever. And it's like, it's a lot, and I understand why our generation and people suffer from anxiety and stress and all of this, and it's truly an ADD and ADHD, and I get all of it, but I think we're all just people going through a life experience in 2024 that is truly just screens upon red notifications that it's tough to go through. So write some stuff down. Get that pen and paper out sometimes. It's pretty awesome to have.
Yeah, two seeds from that. I think, to your point, there's so many inputs. We live in a world where back in 1950 or whatever, you had a few books, you had these thinkers, and they were usually somewhat not different in their thought process. Like, just they were somewhat similar, but I think today you get so many different thoughts that it's so critical to kind of, I call it like, kind of tending your inputs and making sure the inputs are different, and making sure you don't have too far out there inputs. So then you're, thinking the world's going to end tomorrow. The AT&T outage is, whatever, hacking our system versus just things going down. But I think that's important. And then B, I think your point of like, you get better at it over time is super important. A weird idea or a weird metaphor, that's how I think sometimes, is like Pokemon. It's like, if you only catch 2 or 3 Pokemon, every one of those Pokemon's huge. It's like, I'm going to catch this. As you start to write down ideas, I found personally, you start to have a better filter of like, okay, I'll write that down, or that's not even a good idea. And I think unless you do this a lot, you kind of, and I think with marketing is just a lot of ideas which then get executed upon. And if you're kind of just like, any idea gets executed upon, then you have a bunch of crappy executions, because to be honest, not every idea is worth it. That's why it's important to write them down and then see them. And I think that's a hard thing for people to accept. And if you don't do this all the time, you get one idea, light bulb moment. It's like, we need to do a full campaign around it. It's like, hold up. Throw that in the oven, let it cook for a bit, and see if we still want in a week, 2 weeks, a month. So I love that.
And I'm going to peel back the onion a little bit further. Like in my early 20s, definitely would be just being a young 20-year-old, and you have an idea, you think about it at night, and you wake up the next morning, you're like, I'm glad I didn't execute that. That was not a clear thought, right? That's not, it sounded cool at the time. And you get the echo chamber of your buddies or whomever around you, like, that's a great idea, we should work on that. It's like you wake up, you're like, this is a stupid idea. The last thing I'll say is, this is no self-promotion or anything, but collectively through my social media channels, I think I have, like, I don't know, 10,000 connections, whatever that is, mostly through Twitter, LinkedIn, a little bit of Instagram, Facebook, etc. And one of my favorite things to do, it's so awesome to be able to do this, whether you have 50 followers on Twitter, 50 million. One of my favorite examples is, just like you said, Jordan, if you have an idea and you put it down and other people piggyback off that, because you get anxiety to be like, almost thinking you're so unique that no one else has ever thought of this certain situation, and you don't want to put yourself out there. But there's nothing cooler than putting out anything, whatever that, I don't care if it's a tweet, a picture, hey, I listened to this book or this movie, and people double down on that and give you an opinion. They loved it, they hated it, whatever. The other thing I like to do in the same realm, my girlfriend and I can't figure out what we want to have for dinner or go out to dinner on a Friday night. What better way than around 3 o'clock put out something, hey, where should I go to dinner tonight? In Green Bay. Give me some recommendation. Thinking about a fish fry. You get 5 responses. It's like, wow, I didn't have to think of that. I just used my platform of 50 people or 100,000 people to be able to do it. It's so sick, and like, just put it out there. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You delete something the next morning because you feel embarrassed? Like,
something that came to mind there as you're talking, Matt, is keeping the social and the social media.
Yeah.
I mean, it's social for a reason,
yes.
Like, kind of asking people, building ideas. And I think as companies, we forget that for sure. And it's just a publish media thing rather than social of like, throw out, hey, we're thinking about writing an ebook on this. Thoughts? Like, before you spend the time, like, it's this dinner ebook. There's such continuity between those two thoughts as like an individual for leisure or a business for like they're trying to make profit off something. Do you want us to start a newsletter like this? If you think a newsletter would be something you'd sign into, rather than deploying it and not really thinking in a social lens. Yeah, I could go for hours on that.
Yeah.
I think it's forgotten so much. But I think, Matt, it's time to get in the hot seat. Are you ready to jump in the hot seat?
I'm ready.
All right, we're going to start with this or that, get to yes or no, and then more open-ended if you want to add more comments onto
Cool.
it. First question, in-house content creation or outsource?
In-house, no doubt.
Or organic content or paid?
It has to be both. It has to be. I'm not kidding. Like, it has to be both.
Yeah.
Like, unless you somehow hit the nail on the head 07 to 2014 where you really grew your social channels that well that you don't need to use paid because you have that many followers. But I doubt you have a huge TikTok following unless you're putting out consistent content, which would require content to be put, like, there has to be a marriage between both. There just truly has to.
They feed.
Yes.
Yeah, they feed into each other. I like that answer. Short form or long form content?
Probably short form, just based off of that rule of thumb from one of your last guests about the 6 seconds of attention span.
Is marketing more of an art or a science?
Wow, that's actually the best. That's the tough. Usually I'm pretty quick with that. I'm gonna go science because the art can be very cool. You could spend $50,000 on a video and not know why you did that. And you have no data or analytics to back up anything. And I've worked with people that are so creatively incredible, but they just don't have the business sense, analysis, demographic info to understand why they're doing something a certain way. And they might get lucky once in a while because a certain piece of media, goes, I hate the word, I'm not even going to say viral, but it runs the algorithm well. but they don't know why. Why did that happen? And they don't look at the analysis. And you could have just a very simple Instagram account for a business that is just black background, 1080 by 1080 with a white text on it. And it could get the same information across almost, maybe even faster if you did it. It doesn't have to be artistic. It doesn't have to be this 4K video we're pushing out, a couple gigs of media. It could be simple. So I'm going to go science.
Yeah, someone mentioned Mr. Beast kind of proving that there is a science to the whole YouTube thumbnail and that video. So definitely
that episode's incredible. That Joe Rogan episode is nuts. Like, if anyone hasn't listened to that, he's not just some goofy kid from North Carolina. Like, he was literally like, they're in the trenches figuring this out on Skype calls with 4 or 5 other buddies, and like it's cool, it's artistic as hell, but there's science backing every single reason they put out every single piece of information. They format it a certain way, and it's amazing. So yeah, definitely science.
Yeah, I love it. All right, yes or no? Will AI be a major part of marketing in 5 years?
Oh, for sure. I don't see how it could go away. Like, I think, and I can't say I know, but I think that there will be, just like everything, kind of the string theory or the rubber band theory in the universe. Like, we're pulling it this way, it's going to slingshot back this way, and we'll find a middle ground. How that works, where that works, I don't know. I feel like we're probably getting in a scary place with that. We are in an election year, so I imagine that will impact some things. And as we progress, we'll see how the world operates under those things. Not even just marketing or sales, like truly like how things are being fixed civilizationally. Does it get worse? Does it get better? But yeah, it's going to be a part of marketing. It's just a matter of how much we allow it, I guess. And it's nice to have, though. It really is beautiful. And there's so much out there that I'm learning from people like you, Jordan, or I have another couple friends that are really getting into AI more. And it's like, man, you don't even utilize this, but you know that I utilize this or would in marketing or podcasting or whatever. And you're sharing in that information that I can try that. And it's going to cut my bandwidth just in half or in 10%. Or I don't even need to come up with anything more because I use ChatGPT and it's a starting point.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love that. I think, yeah, in the world, who knows where it's at, but it does seem like it will be a core part of marketing, even in a year, for sure. Can you achieve marketing success without a substantial budget?
Yeah, easy. I worked with clients that had $500 a month, $1,000 a month, and even at the time, getting into marketing, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. It's a pretty big building we're in right now, but that's all we're putting towards marketing. I understand. Yeah, I mean, I challenge anyone from someone that maybe is a agency to someone that is a bootstrapped, not a huge fan of that term, but a bootstrapped, like, one department marketing person. I challenge them to say that you can, if you have just the autonomy or the opportunity or the responsibility to run something, you can do it. You can literally figure it out. Like, you can hack your way through anything on the internet, and I promise it doesn't cost 4 to 5 figures. Now, we wouldn't have jobs without marketing budgets, Jordan, of course, but I think it's important to, not think that, just like back to fitness, you don't need to pay for the highest membership in town and get a personal trainer and weigh all your food out and do factor meals. Like, you can literally figure it out without that. It's really not that hard. Use the internet, figure it out, hack your way through it, and hire a couple free interns for a while. And if they're good, then pay them.
Yeah, get scrappy. Yeah. I love it. All right, we've covered about a lot in this hot seat, so I got one more for you. What is one of the biggest time wasters in marketing?
Analysis paralysis, probably. Like, it's really, really easy in what we do to get all this data, dive so far into it, go through a forecasting sheet, a reporting sheet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then come to realize the decision you made off that was flawed because the data was skewed. You might have missed something. Your team might have missed something. Externally, your partner or the other company you're working with might have not provided you information about some sort of fixed cost they have. And you just wasted time pulling some data that truly didn't matter. And when you go macro, you're like, hey, this business is actually in good health. Why are we going so far into the weeds? And I think there's just so much data and science that it's easy to do that because we want to know, we want to understand, and we want to fix a problem. that's what marketing kind of does. It fixes problems, whether it be good PR, bad PR, leaning into things. It fixes, but it's like, it's so easy that I have examples of clients I've worked with where they are in a panic mode because of their boss's boss's boss, and you're trying to help them solve a problem, and you spend weeks on something, and you end up realizing, oh, remember that spreadsheet I made back in April? Yeah, it's November. I haven't even looked at it in 3 months. So I would say just over-analysis of things.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there's so many mantras, move fast, break things. I think you learn by doing. So it's important to have that balance of planning, proactive, being intentional, but also like a plan is only useful once it meets a battlefield, and then you can pivot from it. So I really like that. I think that's something early in my career I was unaware of, and now catching up, it's like, what is worth spending that time on, and what can we just launch? And it's like one way or two way doors, essentially. It's like, rebuilding a whole website, maybe spend time talking to customers, doing that, launching a newsletter. Maybe we can do that and then stop, after a few weeks or a month or so. So I think it's important to, again, wisdom, use your damn brain. All right. I think we're ready to get into the life section. Something I always find interesting is a lot of marketers, a lot of people that I look up to or that have good marketing acumen, they also have that in life, or they think uniquely about life. So the first question that I want to ask you is based off a movie, Inception. It's all about where people go into each other's minds, dreams, and incept ideas. So I want to ask you, Matt, if you could go into the minds of all the humans, kind of thinking outside of business, outside of marketing, and incept one idea. So tomorrow they wake up and they think your idea you incepted is theirs, and they act out of that idea. What idea would you incept?
It's going to sound very Hakuna Matata, hippie, but I think just like overall understanding of when you're walking around, knowing the day-to-day struggle someone might be having. I always thought of this thing when I started driving, getting my temps, and you'd be driving and you'd see someone flying down the highway. Your instant reaction is like, that asshole. But you have no idea if they're driving 90 miles an hour because they're going to an emergency, like a true emergency. And I think we just put blinders on as people. And I would say I'm better than most, but I'm not a perfectionist at it, is like understanding just like from an empathy and sympathetic standpoint of like, maybe this person's having a bad day. I don't know how you fix that. Is that truly just like, I always think of like there used to be that Instagram or Snapchat filter where you would put it up on your head and it would have like a running thing and it would say like, you're this, whatever. And I always think if someone had like a billboard on their forehead that said a level of like, hey, I'm tolerant today of people by, 0 to 10. 10, I'm super tolerant, or 0, I'm not fucking with people today. Like, I don't know how you fix that, but like if there was some sort of receptor, like the way whales or dolphins communicate, if there's something like that, you would know like, ooh, I sense that energy isn't positive, and you can sense it even right now. But it's like, I think that would help and go a long way. Kind of just a bullshit radar even too, if that's possible. I don't know. I don't know if that would help or make things worse, but it might crack a couple eggs before we get there. But I think it's a decent idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think your idea would be good. It's almost like kind of give the benefit of the doubt, lean into the side of that. And there's this Hanlon's razor. I might be messing up the mental motto, but it's assume ignorance, not malice. So if someone cuts you off, don't assume malice, because to be that malice, like you have to time it pretty well to cut somebody off and actually be trying to be a dick to them. It's usually to the point it's like, oh, I forgot I was trying to get off a left here and I got to get over, so I'm going to pull right in front of Matt. And, does Matt then say, hey, they didn't know, and that's on them, ignorance versus laying on the horn, giving two birds, trying to get out, and next thing you know, someone's recording it, someone's shot dead, and it's like all over that. So I really think to the point though, the world would be so much better, because the step to do that, I believe, is taking a step out of oneself. Okay, I don't own the road, right? I mean, in your example of someone speeding past me, it's not my road. I'm merely a player on the road. In thinking of a game, it's like I'm player 1, player 947, and they're a different player. This isn't my game that they're playing in. So I think that would be definitely beneficial for all, just so we assume kind of the betterment. And to your point of like, just kind of talk to people in a way that maybe if they're having a terrible day, it helps them. And you don't need the bullshit meter. You don't need the thing on the forehead, because you opt towards that every single time, which is hard because then you have to be in a good place. You can't be anxious, behind, or whatever. So it is a challenge to get out of yourself. But I really do think the world would be better off with that.
I agree.
So, Matt, what is something you do outside of marketing, outside of business, outside of podcasting that when you come back to do those things, you do them a little bit better? Does any practice, habit come to mind for you?
I would, as I grow older and become more mature, some would say less mature, I think podcasting and just business and communication, trying to be a better communicator. I don't think there's ever a point where you've reached full success at that. I know that my patience level at times with people is pretty low because I just expect people to want to highly achieve in their life, whether they are a garbage man, a teacher, a doctor. I expect people to put their all in, and I know that's not the reality. And I know people are triggered by certain things, they're distracted by other things, but I would say trying to be more empathetic and understanding, and knowing that the way I conduct myself in this setting should be different in this setting, but should still have the same foundational level of like chameleoning in my communication style to someone, being honest, being respectful, like building trust. I think it's just kind of it bleeds over. Outside of those things you mentioned, podcasting, business, etc. Like I am a big brother for Big Brothers Big Sisters in Green Bay. I've done some coaching in the area. Coached baseball for 5 years. Varsity level, coached one winter a 5th grade girls basketball team. So like those are all very different mediums. Sport is the foundation. Teamwork is the foundation. But like I promise you, to no surprise to your listeners, a 10-year-old girl playing basketball at elementary is far different than an 18-year-old boy about to graduate from high school, all conference, going into the real world. But they still have they're still kids. They still need to know that you care for them and understand them. So I think just like trying to stay in the moment while we're being bombarded with all these notifications or these screens is important. So I try to do my best at that, but I know I had one of my hardest professors in college, but one of my favorites, Dr. Phil Clampett, always said you can do your best to communicate as clear as possible, but sometimes people are not receptive to it. And that can be because they don't like you. They don't want to understand. They are feeling threatened by what you're telling them, what you're saying. It might be completely flipping their bias on their head. They might have some ideology that is impossible to break, and you might not be able to overcome that, but doing your best to be empathetic and trustworthy and all that, I think, helps. So I think all of the things kind of bleed over, and it's very cliche, but the way you do anything, or the way you do something, is the way you do everything. And I think there's some weight to that. And I really, really do believe that the way I keep my office, or I keep my living room or whatever, or my car, is a reflection of how I care about others, or myself. If someone were to enter my car and there is Monster cans or Red Bull cans all on the ground, Jordan, it's like, well, Matt didn't give a shit about picking me up from wherever. And if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, type of thing. But we're all human. We all have dishes in the sink. We all have, garbage needs to be taken out. But as long as it's not going too crazy for too long of a season, I think we're okay.
No, I like that. It does seem like life and business, life and work do bleed over. So trying to be present, trying to be kind of empathetic in both, just helps when you're trying to be in marketing or business. I think, yeah, it's tough to be like two-faced in a sense, have these two personalities. I think it's better just to strive to be a good person, and that'll help you in business. All right, final question, Matt. This has been a really good conversation. I've loved it. What is one thing that you hope, with AI, with all these things changing in marketing all the time, what is something you hope doesn't change in the next 10, 15 years? So it's 2040 or whichever, and we still have this. We're still doing this. What comes to your mind?
Just the idea that you can walk out. I could leave my house right now, walk down the street, strike up a conversation with someone, and it could completely change my life or their life. That's what I hope doesn't change, because we saw that happen in 2020, right? Like, we were disconnected. Some people didn't find their way fast enough on Zoom or FaceTime or communication. And I hope that interpersonal connections never leave, because there's so much value to those things about how we can affect one another positively or negatively. And I don't even know if you still need, I know it's important to still have that like one-to-one connection of someone, because I know, Jordan, we met in person finally like a week or two ago, having coffee, and now we're meeting here, and I'm glad we met the first time doing this, which you encouraged in person, because I think if it was the opposite end, it wouldn't have worked as well on this episode. And I think it's important to never lose track of, like, end of the day, whether we're barbarians or cavemen or people with iPhones attached to the back of our head like the Matrix, like, there still is this human behavior through energy and communication and empathy and giving a shit about each one another that I don't think ever will go away. I hope not, but we'll see what happens.
I love that. That's not the first time I heard that answer for that question. So I'm really pulling that is our future. And yeah, I totally agree that we kind of put that into practice, meeting first. And even through the years of connecting on LinkedIn or these different platforms, it's just different when you get across from someone, you see them. I remember the first time I saw you, I was like, damn, okay, this guy's not tall, but like, it's like, it just gives you more to a person. I'm like, he's big, let's go. Yep. So I love that. And thank you again, Matt, for coming on, sharing your wisdom. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully more conversations in the future with you.
Likewise. Appreciate you having me on. You accepted my LinkedIn request to get on your podcast, so it was awesome. Continue growing and stay consistent with it, and it's going to continue to grow. But yeah, super awesome. I know you have people from all over the country, and you talk to people about marketing, and it's great. Strip the marketing away, strip the career away. You're just having conversations with people, which is all what this is all about.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on, man. And this is the end of the podcast. Thank you for making it this far, because few do. So, to repay you for the time you spent listening to me, my guest, I have an offer, I have a deal for you. If you click the first line in the show notes and sign up for just let me know whether LinkedIn DMs or email jordano@hey.com, I will give you 60 minutes of free marketing help, whether that be guidance on your messaging, positioning, or your content strategy, or even helping you write a landing page for a new product or service you have coming. Sign up for it. Let me know you did. In 60 minutes, I am all yours. That sounded a lot better when I wrote it, but anyways, you get the gist. I really appreciate you being on this journey with me to uncover what truly is marketing and how do we apply it today. I hope to see you back here next week for a new episode, and stay thinking differently.